Hello, my name is Pastor Andy Schreier from Redeemer Lutheran Church in Edna, Texas. But actually, I'm here today at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. My family and I are visiting, and we toured the grounds, and seeing this beautiful, immense cathedral, it actually got me thinking about another church I've heard of, I've never visited, called St. Mary's Lutheran Church in Weisstedt, Sweden. It got me thinking of it because that church, even though it's not as big of a cathedral or as famous, has a very interesting little detail. You see, hanging in the very back part of the church is a life-size crucifix, a cross with Jesus hanging from it. In fact, the Jesus hanging from the cross almost looks lifelike. They say that the hair on it is actually human hair. And the history behind that crucifix is really interesting. It seems that in the 1700s, the King of Sweden was traveling throughout the country, and one Sunday morning he stopped and went to church at St. Mary's Lutheran Church in Weisstedt, Sweden. And when the pastor saw the King of Sweden sitting in the church, he changed his sermon completely and talked about how wonderful the king was, how much he had supported the church, what a good Christian man he was. Well, a few weeks later, a package arrived for the church. It was a gift from the king, that crucifix. But he had some very specific instructions. They were to hang the crucifix in the very back part of the church where anybody preaching from the pulpit could see it clearly. And the note said, I want it where the preacher can see it so that every preacher in that church is reminded who should be the topic of every sermon. That's a good reminder for all of us. Because sometimes we complain about the preaching at our churches. We complain because, well, it's always the same thing. You're talking about how we're sinners and Jesus died for us and saved us. And that's good, but we want more interesting preaching, more practical preaching. Teach us how to have good marriages, how to have happy lives, how to achieve great things in this life. But there's a reason why that shouldn't ever be the focus of our preaching as Christians. I mean, that can be a part of it. That's important this life. But really, Jesus crucified, needs to be the main focus. In fact, Paul talks about that in 1 Corinthians chapter 2. He said, I propose to know nothing among you except that Jesus Christ and Him crucified. Why? Because we are all going to die one day. We need to always remember Jesus and what He did so that through faith in Him we can be in heaven. Our preaching needs to focus on Jesus because our preaching isn't about here. It's not about the here and now. It's about what's coming next. So that's a good reminder for me as a pastor and for all of us out there to keep our focus on what is really important. Is it okay to have sermons about marriage and family, about our lives here on earth? Sure. But we always need to keep our focus on that Savior crucified for